Good afternoon and welcome to TOPRA's Diversity and Inclusion webinar today. We're delighted you can join us. My name is Sinead Whelan, Head of Membership and Data Insight at TOPRA. I'm also the representative for D&I for membership at our Science Council. Today we're going to have a really interesting session, and we're going to do some introductions, starting off with our Chief Executive Kevin Pay and our Chair Cheryl Hall, and introducing the rest of our D&I committee, and some of them will be leading on a session on global teams today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our Chief Executive, Kevin Pay, who would like to share a few words.
Thank you, Sinead. I think it's fair to say that diversity and inclusion has been part of TOPRA's core values from the very start of the organisation. And the way it was conceived, the structure it took, the corporate structure it took, the governance, the way we staffed the organisation, and indeed its leadership from the very outset, had diversity and inclusion at the heart of the organisation. And that's how it's continued and developed. You can see a photograph of a recent Diversity and Inclusion Day that we had with the staff, and we all celebrated the 9 different nations we come from, and I think there's 12 different languages that we speak. We're a global organisation, so diversity and inclusion is not just something we talk about, it's something we live by, and that can be seen throughout the history of the organisation. Recently, we've launched our vision, the 2025 strategy, and here again, this builds on the successful journeys of the past, but at the core of the document is diversity and inclusion, along with equity and equality of access. Throughout the document, everything we do is featured there somewhere. We're determined that we'll give people access to all our courses, and part of that move is to put stuff online. COVID, of course, has sped this up, but we believe that people globally should have access to our courses and learning. And also, we want to put things on e-learning platforms so that people can choose when they learn, so they can learn around their families, their caring duties, or indeed their jobs. The other thing that we've recently done is we've added assistive technologies to our website so that differently abled, visually impaired, or people that learn in different manners have got the tools, the assistive tools, to use our website. This isn't to say that there's not more we can do. And today, the passionate speakers that you're about to hear are part of what informs the board and the executive at TOPRA of what we need to do and where we need to be looking. We're not complacent, and I think that I will learn as much from this afternoon's presentations as I'm sure you will. So just enjoy the afternoon, and I certainly intend to. Thank you for attending. I'm going to hand on to Cheryl, who's the head of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Cheryl.
Hi, hello everyone, and welcome to this very important webinar on diversity and inclusion. I have to say I'm really delighted to be talking to you as a recently appointed chair of this committee. I joined for all the passion that you heard in Kevin's voice, and for all the passion that I bear for this too. I really agreed to take the role because it was a board level advisory role, and this shows that TOPRA wants to be a leadership voice in this space. It's also evidenced by the fact it was a signatory to the Science Council Declaration. That's really, really important. So for me, being part of something that's everyday business governance, as well as being publicly held to account, is very important for any organisation that wants to make strides in this area. And you can find out lots more about this on our website, and you can see that our commitment is part of our 2025 strategy. And for me, as a regulatory professional, and now as a consultant in sustainable and responsible business practice, it's very important for me as an individual to work with businesses who truly want to make a difference. We've all heard about greenwash. We don't want this to be whitewash. We want this to be something really impactful on our people, our members, and our businesses. So I stand for better, I stand for fairer, I stand for stronger together. And I know that TOPRA and this committee are absolutely committed to doing this too. As Kevin said, this is not a new agenda. So TOPRA has been active within the Science Council for over 3 years now. And from its inception, from Linda White's great leadership and Jonathan Tatone's new committee that's now grown and established, there's been some great work on a solid foundation. We've had great progress on the Science Council framework. There's been some really good news on the benchmarking processes that TOPRA has been through. We definitely rank well among similar organisations. So well done to that team. And thank you, Jonathan, Linda, Sinead as our representative, and the committee for taking us to this point today. But as Kevin said, we have ambitions. We want to build on this firm foundation. And it's aligned with TOPRA's outreach strategy as well. We wish to reach our members everywhere, no matter what their age, their gender, their disability, their ethnicity. We are all members together in this, and we want to ensure access to really world-beating, world-class educational experiences that grow us as individuals and help to grow our business, that serve our patients who are equally as diverse as we are, serve them well. We invite you to add your voice to this. If you have any stories to tell, or if you have tips to pass on, why not consider becoming a committee member? We'd love to hear from you. So diversity and inclusion matters to TOPRA because it matters to you, our members everywhere. We need to make an effective platform for our membership. And to do this, we need your ideas and feedback. So please engage with the team at the end of this session in the webinar Q&A session. We would really love to hear your questions and your feedback. So thank you very much for listening in. It's super to be with you, and it's great to be with the team talking to you together today. And so now we're going to look at the list of the team. So if we could have the next slide, please. We have the next slide, Sinead. Here we go. So when we come to do the panel session, you will see us all. You'll be able to see our names and put the names to the faces. But we've got myself, we have Aman, Ifty, Jonathan, Linda, Andrea, Anna, Angela, and Alan. I'm really proud of this team. I'm proud of the work they're doing. But now I'm going to hand on to these experts in their field. So if I may, I would like to hand on to Ifty to help us explore some of the global topics that we want to address. Thank you very much, Ifty.
Great, thank you ever so much, Cheryl, for that. Now, I'm going to start off by saying I don't purport to be an expert in D&I, but I certainly can tell you how to work cross-culturally in global teams, and certainly how it's been for me. Now, you might be expecting that having spent 20 years in industry, you're going to get a textbook answer, something which is more familiar with McKinsey & Co. or corporates or even HR manuals. The reality is quite different for me. So where did I learn and pick up these initial skills to work across cultures and teams? It was actually from my family. I'm from a family of 9, 6 sisters, 3 brothers. My mum was a translator for the High Commission of Malawi and speaks 9 languages. So there were always people at home coming and discussing various difficulties, whether that be illiteracy, discrimination, caste, education, workers' rights. That was my mum. On the other hand, my dad graduated with a degree in philosophy, so we were subjected to many, many hours of discussions and always questioning ourselves. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Things along that nature. And then there's been my 20 years in industry, and having worked in some 5 different continents, at least 7 different countries I could remember, I've picked up quite a bit in terms of different cultures, and it's genuinely been the best experience of my job in life. In terms of summing up this cross-cultural working, for me, cultural diversity working in these teams, which I'll expand on in a few slides, is one of the basic characteristics of a human society. It's an indispensable asset to the progress of humanity. Our workplace, school, country increasingly consists of various cultural, racial, and ethnic groups. And to be able to learn from one another in these teams, we need to understand so much about one another. This is something we must continue to extend and develop our understanding. So let's deepen our understanding of the complexities of diversity and discuss these different dimensions. So I'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so what we've got here on the screen are the dimensions of diversity. What are these different dimensions, and how can we build relationships and expand our understanding looking at this? Now, when I looked at this, what I noticed from this is that there are two elements. That you've got the inner circle, you've got the outer circle. Now, the inner circle internalizes essentially your personality. So it's something you have very little control over, but it does affect our behavior and our attitude. I mean, our age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, race, gender, physical ability, all is something that we just don't have control over. And ultimately, sort of is the makeup of our personality. And then you look at the external behaviors, such as your marital status, your political ideology, appearance, your faith, education, etc., etc. And this external dimension shapes the social factors around you and sort of becomes the basis of your life experience. Certainly for me, it has been, and it develops and changes over time. It's through these dimensions of diversity that we begin to filter and see our colleagues and make sense of our experiences. So when we're made aware of these different influences, we can make choices about our behaviors and our reactions. Almost every day for me, I will, or even as a group, we will derive some form of lesson each day in response to what we see, read, and hear. And I'll touch on the current goings on, or the injustice of our brother in mankind, George Floyd, who was recently murdered by the police. So we can understand from this that there are abusive powers when you believe you can get away with it. And this is something that we should discourage in terms of a diverse and inclusive environment. Now, as a leader of the organization that I work with, I say, stand your ground in a way that empowers you and others too. Try to do good and recognize what's worse if you don't. It ultimately comes down to our responsibilities as individuals and leaders at work in humanity to send that clear message. Remember, we choose our language and we choose our behavior. So as social beings, we should aspire to be acceptable and understanding to different cultures, beliefs, and values, and so on. And I want to finish on something which Jane Elliott, a third grade teacher from the US, said. She's been a diversity voice for 40 years. And she said, there's only one race on the face of the earth, and that's the human race. Next slide.
Great. So thank you, Ifty. So I'll be talking a little bit and I'll be breaking down the term that we actually talk about a lot, culture. So why did I start looking at diversity, inclusion, and belonging in our industry? Well, I've been in the CRO industry for over 23 years, and I started to notice the inequity when undertaking clinical research. How to think about engaging diverse populations, how could we be how could we actually engage more of those diverse populations in clinical research if, say, sponsor companies and CROs were not diverse themselves, and as a result did not have those lenses to understand the barriers themselves? And I've heard the term thrown about cultural expert, and my journey actually into diversity and inclusion, because I did not want to be the token brown person, frankly. So I went back. I've been studying it. It's a passion of mine as well to understand the landscape, not just in our industry, but other industries as well. So part of my studies were actually to do a self-reflection about what is culture. And my readings from this book, Conflict Across Cultures, was how the shared, often unspoken understanding in a group, it's a series of lenses that shape what we see and what we actually don't see, how we perceive and interpret, where we draw boundaries, and often invisible to us, the culture shapes our ideas of what is important, influences our attitudes and values, and animates our behaviors. Each of us belong to multiple cultures. That's a key point. And so we are experiencing transitioning cultural boundaries within and between us from an early age. Now, it's quite heavy things to understand, but why I looked at this is that, you know, I wanted to go beyond the national culture as well. And the term culture and intercultural, you know, these terms often bring to mind the differences in our national cultures. And, you know, if we just if we just go into a box and say, for example, Chinese learners might have different expectations of a university classroom than, say, Belgian learners. Ugandan communities may make decisions in a manner quite different from communities in Brazil. However, here's the interesting point. Differences within a particular country may be even greater than the differences between the national tendencies as well. So, you know, what I really had to take a step backwards was I didn't want to stereotype based just on nationalities. I didn't want to stereotype at all, but there's a lot of stereotyping of nationalities, and that complicates our discussions. Farmers in Alberta here in Canada, where I am, they might share many aspects of worldview with farmers in China. So people separated by national differences may actually find they're very connected by profession, for example, the regulatory profession, or a particular sector, or a generation. So it's really important to understand the concept of cultural difference beyond national cultures to other aspects that actually affect our interactions with each other. So I want to reinforce that what I learned is actually not to put people into boxes. And I'm going to go through just a quick personal example for myself, and kind of have a moment of vulnerability, you know, through my readings. I actually called out, you know, thinking about the metaphor of a river to describe culture. It's the underground rivers of meaning and making, the places where we make choices about what matters and how that connects us to others in a group of which we belong. Now, that group can be anything. So this appealed to me for a few reasons. And I understood the underground nature, but I also see a river constantly flowing for myself and others, and adapting according to the personal experiences you have. Okay, so this really made me think, what groups do I belong to? Because culture presents itself in many layers. I really had to think about what layers, you know, I have. I've always referred to myself as a person in British Sikh. I consider myself to be brought up in the Punjabi culture as well. A working mother, a wife, the oldest sister of 5 girls, a daughter, a functional manager, a leader, you name it, the list could go on, right? So my national culture, being raised in England, has influenced me greatly. You know, raised in a predominantly white location within London, although I've always had a strong affinity to London, even though I'm sitting here on the west coast of Vancouver. But having lived on the west coast for 13 or so years, I consider my choice of where I live as significant for me. Although here's the thing, I'm sitting in Vancouver, so I've got a strong British accent, confuses people when they meet me here on the mainland and when they speak to me. But then people also see a woman of South Asian descent, of the Sikh faith, as I wear a head covering, and I'm living in Canada. So what culture are you going to box me into? That's what, you know, I had to think about that myself. And for me personally, my faith has allowed me a very deliberate context to my way of life. And I learned through my readings that I should not kind of hide myself and be authentic. And being of the Sikh faith for me is my strongest significant cultural group that I choose. And I find no matter where I travel in the world, this part of me doesn't change. I could be sitting in any part of the world, but that's my undercurrent. That's what, you know, shapes me to be the person that I am, for my guidance, and gives me guidance for my self-care, my own reflection, to improve myself, and to continue to see humans as equal in one global village. And it's my, actually funny, it really fits in well. My diversity and inclusion journey is about what I believe in my personal faith as well, about recognizing the human race as one, and how women are elevated to an equal status. So with this background, it's given me an immense sense of social justice. But I want everyone to take away, what is your culture? How do you define yourself? What boxes do you put yourself in? Okay, thank you. Can I have the next slide? That's over to Ifty as well.
Okay. All right. So this is a follow-on from how do we work, or how should we work, and this is going to be more again of my personal experience. I'm head of global regulatory affairs for an organization that's just over 20, and it has about 30 people that we work with across the world. I took it a little bit more seriously and decided that the only way that I could really understand working with my partners, vendors, team members, was actually to go and live there. So I chose to live in the Middle East for a while, specifically in Egypt and the GCC region. I went to Ras Al Khaimah, which is one of the Emirates, and worked there in assessment. I spent 2 terms in Japan, in Tokyo. Spent a little bit of time in Canada. Again, 2, I call them tours in the US, because it really is quite a shock to the system when you come from the UK to the US. I really did find that even more challenging than I did in Japan. And then, you know, Europe has been sort of my neighborhood, really. I spent, that's where I work and live. And one of the best elements, or the best outcomes of COVID-19, and wait for it, it's that I don't have to do that commute anymore. And my life began with waking up in the morning, and I don't live too far away from Heathrow Airport, and was getting on a plane. Now my commute is 10 meters. And once I switch on my computer, I have a blast. In fairness, I work with 12 different people, 10 different nationalities, 5 different time zones, and I absolutely enjoy it. Working cross-culturally is just unbelievably enriching for the soul. So my personal experience of working across the globe on a daily basis, and real life as well, has mean that I've had to learn a lot, acknowledge even more. There's a lot of differences in culture that Aman mentioned, that has meant that I've had to change my behaviors and reactions too. So as part of a mutual acknowledgement and respect of different ways of thinking, I've had to embrace, and so has my team, these differences. And it's only made us, my team, more productive, creative, skillful, and I could go on and on and on how amazing the people I work with. I mean, we're called rapport. It's just so obvious, isn't it? In terms of the way that we aspire to working with different minds. And again, I say I'm not an expert in this area, but recently you've seen in social media posts and, you know, what's going on, that people are spending a lot of time appreciating differences in values, behaviors, beliefs. Now, in February, we took the opportunity to spend an entire day bringing in a specialist consultant, and she did a diversity of thinking session with us, and that allowed us to establish some form of norm amongst our teams because we're so different in the way that we are. But it gave us a sort of a template which we could work within. We didn't have to, but it really did focus us. And there were people in this category, thinkers, and then there were those with high achievers and those that were sort of laid back. But it was a nice experience to go through. We really did enjoy it. And I will continue to make mistakes, and hence having this flexible and openness when establishing these norms shows a great deal of loyalty and respect amongst us all. Now, moving on to this developing a team identity, which one really needs to do when you're in an organization, to outline roles and responsibilities. It can and does work in most cases. Within our organization, we encourage proactively everyone to share their experience, not just technically, scientifically, but whichever way they can. Some of us within the group are known as the social workers, consult, or listeners group, where you can just go and talk about whatever you want and we'll just sit and listen. And some of us are absolutely brilliant at it. Our CEO, Lorna, I call her the social worker, and whenever I've got issues, I just go and talk about them. And yeah, there's the scientific and technical stuff, and we're always strategizing, but ultimately I need something else in my work life too. And those values are really important to us. Now, in different countries, there are, so I've had to accept that there are, and it's nice, various thinking styles, the way they communicate, and you touched upon that, Aman, as well. And that has meant this has necessitated to building a rapport and creating this circle of trust. With it comes, well, it sort of comes from your own personality as well, and also your diversity of thinking, your own life, your work experience is so valuable, and you will continue to ask questions. And what I would say is you need to ask those questions even if they are going to disrupt the harmony, because all of us are going to ask questions at work. I've worked, and this might sound strange to you, but I've worked in over 50 organizations. That's quite a lot. But when you work in the CRO space, it's not particularly that much. And I've had to disrupt the harmony because it's my reputation at stake, or there are so many different personalities. But I've always just had to do what I've done, and that's what I would encourage, and I certainly encourage it within my organization. My final point is really to continue to leverage this cultural diversity within the companies that you work in. I certainly promote it, and so does Lorna. And even within not just our work environment, but as part of the community, about who we are, whether we are people of faith or not. You know, every action is but by your intention, and your intention needs to be questioned. So it was a great opportunity to work within our trade organization, TOPRA, and ensure that these traditions and personalities and disruptions that we have experienced are brought to the table. Our values, beliefs, experiences, and assumptions, whether that be norm or now the new word, new norm, needs to be unlocked and open to improvement. Thank you.
Thanks, Ifty. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk about how can you navigate that cultural minefield. And I read something actually early this morning, because there is a lot of talk about what is going on right now, and it's been brought up to the forefront for everyone to think about their own prejudices as well. And I read somewhere that prejudice is an emotional commitment to ignorance. So as we increasingly work with colleagues, with various stakeholders in the work that we do as regulatory professionals who come from all parts of the world, we're talking to agencies globally as well, we're talking to our colleagues globally as well, it's truly vital to understand how how cultural differences can affect our business. So I've given some helpful tips here, like don't underestimate the challenge. So management and work styles, actually it speaks to very much to what Ifty was saying earlier on about diversity of thought, how we think, stem from lifelong habits that can be hard to change if you're not aware or you don't have that personal commitment to kind of step out of your comfort zone as well. So that can be hard to change. And so also apply multiple perspectives. So be aware of your own expectations and behaviors, but also consider how members of other cultures may perceive yourself and your teammates as well. I've been on this journey, I continue on this journey, and I can tell you there's a lot more inward reflection for me than outward reflection right now, okay? About what I can do to evoke change and find the positive and all the other approaches that we've got. So the differences that people have are varied backgrounds, you know, we're not going to speak to that so much because there's so much, you know, information on the public domain about how varied backgrounds bring, you know, true innovation and, you know, to that work group, no matter what industry you're in. But think about that a lot more, I think. And here's the kicker. You need to constantly adjust your position. So you need to adapt your own behavior more so to meld with the style of your colleagues as well. So like I said before, it really is about inward reflection as well. Every single person, every single one of us can make a change in how we react ourselves as well. And of course, we should definitely be thinking about being upstanders and not bystanders when we do see prejudice, or we need to step up for maybe our colleagues accordingly and maybe speak up for those that don't have a voice or are not emotionally, you know, they're too shy to actually have that voice as well. So I think this is why we have this committee as well, so that we can be your, you know, we can represent the member base. But, you know, coming back to navigating this minefield, you know, we often rely on cliches and stereotypes, and I've tried to break that down a little bit, thinking about that. That can actually lead us to these false assumptions, which are not good for us in any way. So, you know, be continuously thinking about your own biases. And I'm going to break that down in the next slide, please, about what the biases can actually be and how we need to recognize them. And, you know, as individuals, when you get a chance, sorry, next slide. Thank you. Great, thank you. So to recap, there's a few biases, okay? And we all have them. We all have some form of privilege. We all have some sort of bias. You know, it's unfair to say only a certain community has biases or something. We all have them, okay? And we should be encouraged to think about how to unravel our own personal unconscious bias. So although they are automatic and unintentional, they can influence behavior. And actually there's a small piece on the diversity portion of the TOPRA website that talks a little bit about bias as well. So when these biases actually go unchecked, this is where you make poor decisions, not only in your professional lives, but also your personal lives as well. So it might seem innocent, but without realizing it, you know, we have a responsibility to mitigate them because we all have them. Okay, so I'm going to go through, for example, the types of biases, and I want you to think about how maybe you perhaps kind of had a situation or an environment that maybe this kind of pops up for. So affinity bias. So this is a tendency to warm to people who are like yourself. Okay, have a think about that. The halo effect is a tendency to think that everything about a particular person is good simply because you like them. Really plays into the affinity bias, that does. Perception bias, the tendency to believe one thing about a group of people based on stereotypes and assumptions, making it impossible to be objective about individuals. And confirmation bias is actually the tendency to seek to confirm your pre-existing ideas and assumptions about a group of people. So you might actually go out to further other people outside and ask for validation of that as well. And what I think is actually probably something that we really need to think about in the environments that we're in is groupthink. Groupthink, the tendency to try too hard to fit into an existing culture, mimicking others and holding back thoughts or opinions, resulting in the loss of identity and truly the lost creativity and innovation where we're trying to make a difference. And I can tell you personally, the last one is something that I've experienced the good and the bad. And I've been in teams where I am the only person of color, where everyone is very similar, same gender, go down to the same haircut even, right? And it really made me think about how I felt, you know, I didn't realize it until I took a step back and realized that I was the odd one out because of the experiences I have, and I had a different way of thinking, right? So that's something about, I'd like everyone to think about how we do that ourselves. And you know, to really move forward on this journey, you know, we really need to analyze the cultural dynamics of our own teams, our own community, where we sit, and we need to learn how to motivate and inspire different cultures. Learn about different cultures that surround you in your workplace or in your neighborhood, even by asking questions. And you know, this will really help you unravel that intersectionality of culture and how it fits into this very large diversity puzzle. Ifty talked a little bit about the dimensions of diversity wheel. I mean, there are people in this space that talk about nothing else about dimensions of diversity, but how do you bring that to what you're doing? So celebrate the diversity of a team, you know, allow all the people that you work with to feel that their values and their beliefs and their experiences are fully appreciated. And here's the underlying secret I found. To a certain point, great, we can break down dimensions of diversity and we can think about the wheel and we can think about that, but ultimately it really comes down to knowing your colleagues on a personal level. Regardless of their culture and background, you're going to help to find that common ground, and you're going to deepen your appreciation of differences, because differences are not deficiencies in any way. And you know, I want to say that because here I am, you know, I'm sitting on the West Coast in Canada. My lens is unique to me. I'm a mother of 3 boys. You know, it's very important for me to be in a diverse and inclusive environment, and that's where I am. And that respects when I bring my whole self to work. You know, it's a safe space for me. I speak up when I need to be about being, so I'm allowed to be my authentic self. And I continue to develop among, guess what, a variety of different people. I work my actual immediate team. They're different backgrounds, they're different cultures, they're different locations, varying expertise and experience, each with their own stories. And I found with this team, we really had to break down a lot more about what we believe or perceive, and we've broken that down. And I truly think we're helping to bring that innovation to, you know, bringing innovation to the forefront of our industry as well when we're problem solving. And don't get me wrong, I would not be saying that there haven't been obstacles and glass ceilings that I needed to smash through the years. And yeah, sometimes my voice was different, but you know what, it's okay. And that's why I think we all need to be on our own personal diversity and inclusion journey for ourselves, because ultimately, this is the thing, this is where it gets really, you know, medicines and treatments, because we're in this industry, they don't know any barriers. And people involved in this industry, they do not need to feel these barriers over. So I always say we need to step up, do some self-reflection as well, and then don't be shy in asking other people about their cultures or how they think and what their personalities are as well, breaking that down so we're not just boxing up work and personal life as well. Okay, thank you. I'm now going to pass it on to Cheryl, if that's okay.
Hi, thank you very much, Aman. So, Aman and Ifty, what a rich menu you've presented to us today. So I'll just quickly summarize and then we'll go into the conversation. So let's call it a conversation, not so much Q&A. If you have questions, we're here. If you have topics you want to raise, if you want to make your voice known, we'd love to hear from you. But if I just quickly refresh, we've seen from Ifty and Aman the wonderful dimensions of diversity, something we can really grasp hold and inquire against. I absolutely love the idea that between every action and response, there's a moment of choice. This was played out very clearly. It actually is taken from a very good piece of psychology from Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was somebody who endured the Holocaust, and he was greatly informed by a sense of meaning, which gave him the opportunity to breathe between action and response. And that's how he got through his difficulties. So this moment of choice, this river along which we make those choices, is incredibly important. And hearing both of your real life examples was exhilarating. The different layers and depths that you showed within yourselves, how attractive is that? How warm is that to go towards? How honest is that you can hold these conversations where people have differences and they're not difficulties, that you can talk the truth? That shows psychological safety, something that all businesses should want to create. So that was really wonderful. And those examples of living in different cultures as well is an incredibly important learning. I love the way you hovered over the word prejudice. Prejudice really means prejudgment, and that locks you into no choice. So exactly, that is ignorance. Lifelong habits, yes. But you know, in COVID, we've also learned that a new habit can be created in 6 weeks. So we could choose differently, we could make a difference. And I love the whole self-reflection. So I'll just reflect back to you what came into my mind as you said that. JFK asking, don't ask what America can do for you, but what can you do for America? And who could you help today? If we want to live in a diverse society, this is the way, this is the kind of lens to see outwards, not inwards, but to self-reflect, who are we going to help today? The complexity around the bias was also really interesting. And I totally love to finish with bring your whole self into work. So, you know, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 66 and very proud of it. I'm in my 3rd act. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a scientist. I'm an awkward old biddy at times, but you know, this is who I am. And I've learned to be unafraid. I've learned to be me. I'm really proud of it. So I'm really proud of this team. I delight in it. And I would love now to open up the floor. If you have any questions, if you have anything you want to say, we're here, join us. Thank you so much for listening in. We look forward to hearing from you and talking to you again soon.